silencing, we're not counting gang violence.
Oh my God. Go, run.
On September 10th, Utah Valley University was supposed to host just another stop on Charlie Kirk's American Comeback Tour. Hundreds of supporters packed the auditorium, waving banners and waiting for the conservative firebrand to take the stage. The energy was electric, the cameras were rolling, and Kirk's voice carried the same defiance that had made him a household name. But then, in a split second, everything changed. At 8:47 p.m., a single gunshot echoed through the hall. At first, many thought it was a microphone pop or a firecracker. But when Kirk stumbled, clutched his neck, and collapsed, chaos erupted. Screams filled the air as security rushed to the stage, dragging him out while terrified students stampeded. For the exits, within minutes, the videos hit social media, shocking the nation and sparking a flood of questions. And that's where the story turns from tragedy into mystery. Investigators confirmed the bullet didn't come from inside the auditorium. It came from over 200 yards away, a sniper shot fired with deadly precision.
Enforcement sources have been telling us that this gunshot was fired from a rooftop a short distance away, or about 150 yards away from the courtyard where Charlie Kirk was speaking. And we have some videos of what appear to be a person on that particular rooftop. So I'm going to play this. I want your eye line to be up here by the roof because it's a little bit hard to see. But as we play this, the camera pans, and then you see that dot right there heading in the other direction away from where Charlie Kirk was speaking. I'm going to play it one more time.
That detail alone changed everything. This wasn't an argument gone wrong. This wasn't random chaos. This was planned. So what really happened in Utah that night? Was Charlie Kirk the victim of a lone extremist? Or was this a targeted political hit designed to silence him? And why, weeks later, do we still have no answers? Tonight, we're breaking down the timeline, the investigation, his wife's shocking revelations, and the unanswered questions that make this case one of the most chilling in modern American politics. The evening of September 10th began like countless rallies before it. Supporters of Charlie Kirk streamed into Utah Valley University's auditorium, clutching tickets, wearing branded hats, and buzzing with anticipation. To them, Kirk wasn't just another speaker. He was a voice of defiance, a figure who channeled their frustration into fire. At 7 p.m., doors opened. Security was light but present, bag checks at the entrance, a visible handful of officers stationed inside. Volunteers guided attendees to their seats. Nothing about the atmosphere suggested danger. For most, it felt like a political festival. More than a high-risk event, by 8 p.m., the room was full. Cameras from Turning Point USA's media team were positioned to live-stream the event, while audience members readied their phones to capture clips they could later post on TikTok and Instagram. The crowd was restless, chanting Kirk's name even before he appeared. At 8:15 p.m., Charlie Kirk walked onto the stage. The reaction was explosive. Applause roared. He raised his hand in acknowledgement, his familiar, confident stride on display. For the next half hour, he delivered his speech with a sharpness his supporters loved and his critics loathed. He spoke of sacrifice, of truth, of standing against the tide. But around 8:45 p.m., his tone shifted. Witnesses say he paused, looked over the crowd, and said words that would soon feel prophetic. You fight for what you believe in, even if it costs you everything. Because truth is worth sacrifice. The audience cheered, unaware those words would be replayed as his last public message. Then came 8:47 p.m., a crack pierced the air. Loud, sharp, distinct. At first, some thought it was a sound system glitch. Others thought a balloon had popped. But when Kirk staggered backward, his hand shooting to his neck, the cheers turned into screams. Cell phones captured the horrifying moment. Kirk collapsing, security rushing the stage, the crowd surging for the exits. Panic spread like wildfire. Mothers grabbed their children. Students ducked behind chairs. Shouts of "he's been shot" echoed through the hall. Within minutes, the live stream feed cut off. But hundreds of clips from attendees flooded social media, turning shock into viral chaos. By 9 p.m., local police confirmed what the videos had already made clear. Charlie Kirk had been shot, but the details they shared raised more questions than answers. The bullet hadn't come from inside the auditorium. It had been fired from outside, over 200 yards away. Investigators revealed the shooter had used a clear line of sight, an elevated position perfectly aligned with the stage. That single fact shifted the narrative from random tragedy to chilling precision. Think about it, to hit a target at that distance in a moving and chaotic environment takes planning. It takes setup. It takes intent. This wasn't a spur of the moment outburst, it was an execution. Emergency responders rushed Kirk to the hospital. For hours, supporters clung to hope. But by midnight, the worst was confirmed. Charlie Kirk was dead. Almost immediately, the timeline of that night became a crime scene. Investigators combed the university grounds. Forensic teams searched rooftops, parking garages, and nearby buildings for shell casings or evidence of a sniper's nest. Drones and helicopters scanned the perimeter. But despite the scale of the response, no suspect was found. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, Kirk's wife and closest aides were informed. Their world shattered. Later, she would reveal that in the days leading up to the rally, Kirk had admitted feeling hunted. He told her he was being followed, that he felt like his time might be short. Those private fears, combined with his last public words, gave the shooting an almost prophetic weight. By 2 a.m., the story was everywhere. Major news networks replayed clips of Kirk's collapse on loop. Twitter trended hashtags like #KirkShot and #TruthIsSacrifice. TikTok edits paired his final words with slow-motion footage of the moment he fell. America had witnessed political violence in real time, but the deeper the timeline was analyzed, the stranger it became. Why wasn't there tighter security, especially if Kirk had received threats? How did the shooter position themselves with such accuracy without being detected? And why? In a venue filled with cameras and phones, were there no clear images of the shooter's location? Each unanswered question added to the mystery. Each silence from investigators amplified suspicion. By the next morning, it wasn't just Charlie Kirk has been shot. It was what really happened in Utah. The timeline is now etched into history. 7 p.m., doors open, light security. 8:15 p.m. Kirk takes the stage to roaring applause. 8:45 p.m. delivers final words about sacrifice and truth. 8:47 p.m. shot fired from outside. Kirk collapses. 9 p.m. police confirm shooting. 12 a.m. Kirk's death announced. 2 a.m. story dominates national and international headlines. But this is only the beginning, because the timeline doesn't just show when Kirk was killed, it shows how meticulously it was done. And that opens the door to the bigger, more dangerous questions about motive, conspiracy, and cover-up. When the gunfire ended on September 10th, the auditorium at Utah Valley University transformed from a rally into a crime scene. But in the days and weeks that followed, the real shock wasn't only that Charlie Kirk had been assassinated. It was how little clarity the investigation produced and how much more the silence fueled suspicion. From the beginning, investigators admitted something chilling. The shot didn't come from inside. It came from an elevated vantage point outside, more than 200 yards away. That meant a sniper positioned well before Kirk even walked onto the stage. To many, this wasn't just violence, this was preparation. Law enforcement promised credible leads. They spoke of ballistics tests, drone footage, and security camera reviews. But the updates stopped there. No suspect sketches. No confirmed arrest. No answers about how a shooter had set up undetected in a public space. That vacuum left room for only one thing: conspiracy. And conspiracy thrived because Charlie Kirk himself had already planted the seeds. According to his wife, Kirk had been restless in the days leading up to the rally. In private, he confessed to her that he felt watched. He said unfamiliar cars followed him at night. He spoke of threats that felt more personal, more specific than the usual hate mail. Most hauntingly, he told her, "If something happens to me, remember it was not random." When she shared those words with the media, they hit harder than any official statement. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't social media noise. This was the widow of the man who had just been assassinated, repeating the warnings he had given her, and she didn't stop there. She revealed that Charlie had been writing notes, not campaign material, but private reflections. One of them read, "If they silence me, let it be known I never bent, I never bowed, and I never betrayed the truth." Those words spread instantly. They were printed on posters, painted on murals, quoted in tributes. To supporters, they were proof that Kirk had seen his fate coming and accepted it. To critics, they raised uncomfortable questions. Who exactly was they? Why hadn't his fears been taken more seriously? The investigation provided no comfort. Reporters pressed officials on why security at the event was so light despite the credible threats. They asked how the sniper escaped undetected, why surveillance cameras near the suspected vantage point weren't functioning, and why no suspect had been named. Officials offered only vague responses. Each non-answer hardened the belief that something bigger was being hidden. Meanwhile, the wife's testimony became central to the story. At vigils, she stood before thousands, her voice breaking but her resolve unshaken. "Charlie told me the danger was real. He told me to tell the truth if he could not. And I will." The crowd erupted, chanting her name alongside her revelations weren't just emotional, they were political dynamite. They suggested foreknowledge. They confirmed the threats. They reframed the assassination not as a random act, but as a silencing. And that reframing turned grief into outrage. Conservative outlets amplified every detail. Primetime hosts called the shooting a political hit. Trump himself quoted both Kirk's last words and his wife's testimony, telling supporters Charlie knew the risks and he paid the ultimate price. They wanted him gone because he told the truth. Progressive voices tried to counter, urging restraint until facts were clear. But even their caution only kept the story alive. The divide became sharper. One side crying assassination, the other warning against myth-making. And through it all, the wife's voice remained the most powerful. She wasn't delivering talking points. She was sharing fear, pain, and memories that now looked like prophecy. That authenticity gave her words more weight than any politician's. Her second revelation deepened the mystery further. She claimed Charlie had confided that he might not survive the election season, that he had told her, "If I don't make it home, know that I never regretted standing for what I believed." Those words transformed the narrative. They suggested not just fear, but acceptance. Kirk knew the danger, felt it daily, and walked into it anyway. The investigation, meanwhile, dragged on with no breakthroughs. Each day without answers strengthened the perception of a cover-up. Was the shooter being protected, or powerful interests preventing the truth from emerging? And if law enforcement truly had no leads, how could that be possible in an era of cameras, drones, and digital surveillance? By the third week, the story wasn't just about Charlie Kirk's death. It was about the silence that followed it. His wife's revelations filled that silence, and in doing so, gave the outrage its emotional core. She had turned personal grief into public testimony, and in doing so, kept the conspiracy alive. Charlie Kirk's assassination didn't just leave a family grieving, it ignited a fire across America. What started as candlelight vigils quickly transformed into protests, marches, and national outrage. The question was no longer, was Charlie Kirk shot? It was, who killed him and why? In Utah, the first memorial drew thousands. Supporters carried posters with Kirk's final words, "Truth is worth sacrifice." They lit candles, held prayers, and promised his voice would not be forgotten. But as days turned into weeks without answers, the tone hardened. Signs now read, "Justice for Kirk. This was no accident," and "Stop the cover-up." By the second week, marches erupted across major cities. In Washington, D.C., crowds gathered outside the Capitol chanting, "Who killed Kirk?" In Arizona, protesters lined highways with banners accusing authorities of hiding the truth. In Florida, rallies turned confrontational as supporters demanded congressional investigations online. The outrage was even louder. Hashtags like #KirkMurderPlot and #WhoKilledKirk dominated Twitter. TikTok edits paired clips of his last speech with dramatic music, ending with the moment he collapsed. One viral video spliced his wife's tearful testimony, he told me. It wasn't random, with footage of the sniper's suspected line of sight. That clip alone racked up over 30 million views. Every new post deepened the conspiracy. Independent. Investigators uploaded their own breakdowns, maps of the university, ballistic angles, theories about where the shooter had positioned themselves. Some claimed to have audio evidence of multiple shots, though officials never confirmed it. Others pointed to surveillance camera blind spots, arguing that the shooter had insider knowledge of security weaknesses. Then there was the wife's testimony. Her words that Kirk felt hunted, that he believed something was coming, became the emotional anchor of the outrage. At a massive rally in Phoenix, she stood before thousands and declared, "Charlie told me this wasn't an accident, and I will not let them bury the truth." The crowd erupted. Chants of "She knows the truth" and "Justice" now echoed for hours. Clips of her speech spread worldwide, turning her into both a grieving widow and an unwilling leader of a movement. Media coverage mirrored the divide. Conservative outlets branded the killing an assassination, dedicating hours of primetime to exposing the murder plot. They described Kirk as a martyr silenced by political enemies. Progressive outlets urged restraint, warning against hysteria without facts. Yet even their caution kept the story alive, because every debate replayed the central question: what really happened in Utah? And that's what kept the outrage burning. The mystery: was Charlie Kirk killed by a lone extremist, radicalized by his rhetoric? Was it a professional hit designed to send a message to Trump's camp? Or was it something deeper? A conspiracy involving insiders who knew exactly how to exploit vulnerabilities in his security. Supporters leaned toward the darkest conclusion, that Kirk was eliminated because he was too powerful, too effective, too dangerous to those who opposed him. His wife's testimony gave them confidence. His last words gave them prophecy. And the precision of the attack gave them proof. The conspiracy theories multiplied. Some pointed fingers at political rivals, suggesting his death was timed to weaken Trump's momentum. Others whispered about foreign actors, linking the shooting to international interests threatened by Kirk's influence. A few even suggested betrayal from within. Noting how conveniently the shooter avoided detection, authorities dismissed the theories as speculation. But without hard evidence, the denials rang hollow. And in America's fractured climate, denial often fuels belief. The outrage also reshaped Kirk's legacy. He was no longer just a polarizing activist. To supporters, he was now a martyr, a man who saw his death coming, warned his wife, and still chose to speak the truth. His name was painted on murals, his quotes printed on shirts. His story immortalized in online documentaries. But symbols are powerful and dangerous. For some, Kirk's death symbolized courage. For others, it symbolized the cost of division. Yet for everyone, it symbolized something larger than one man. The state of a nation where violence and politics had become inseparable. And that's where part 3 leaves us. A nation divided. A movement inflamed, and a conspiracy that refuses to fade. Charlie Kirk's death is no longer just a crime scene. It's a cultural fault line. The vigils, The protests, the hashtags, the wife's confessions, they all ask the same question. What really happened in Utah? And until the truth comes out, the outrage will not die down. The sound of that single gunshot in Utah didn't just end a rally. It launched one of the most controversial investigations in recent American history. Weeks later, Charlie Kirk's death is still making headlines. Not because answers have been found, but because answers remain missing. The silence of officials has turned suspicion into outrage, and outrage into a movement from the first. Press conference, investigators promised justice. They confirmed the sniper's distance more than 200 yards away. They acknowledged credible threats had been made in the weeks prior. But then they stopped. No suspect, no motive, no clear timeline of how the shooter escaped. Just vague phrases. We're following leads. The investigation is ongoing. That vagueness became gasoline on a fire. Supporters demanded accountability. A high-profile figure who had warned he was being followed be killed in such a precise manner and yet leave authorities apparently clueless. Each day without an arrest became, in the minds of many, proof of a cover-up. Anonymous leaks added to the tension. Sources claimed surveillance footage near the sniper's suspected location showed unusual movement before the rally. Others alleged Kirk had filed private complaints about threats just 2 days before the event. But true, these details weren't just damning, they were explosive. They pointed not to random chance, but to negligence or even complicity. Meanwhile, Kirk's wife continued to shape the narrative. She spoke of cars parked outside their home, of phone calls with no voice on the line, of her husband's restlessness in his final days. She read excerpts from his handwritten notes, including one that read, "If my voice is silenced, may others rise louder." Supporters wept as they heard it. Critics admitted the words were chilling. Overnight, his private fears became public prophecy. Her role in the aftermath was more than symbolic. She gave the outrage moral authority. She wasn't a politician. She was a widow carrying both grief and determination. Each time she spoke, her words cut deeper than any press release. She didn't sound like someone speculating. She sounded like someone confirming what many already believed, that Charlie Kirk's assassination was deliberate. The cultural impact was undeniable. Murals of Kirk appeared on city walls from Phoenix to Philadelphia. His last words were tattooed on supporters' arms. Online documentaries with titles like The Kirk Files racked up millions of views. Podcasts dissected every second of the Utah shooting. This image, his voice, the night of September 10th will be remembered not just for the chaos inside an auditorium, but for the silence that followed outside it. Charlie Kirk's assassination wasn't only the death of a man, it was the birth of a mystery that has yet to be solved. A sniper's bullet from over 200 yards away, credible threats that were never properly addressed. And a grieving wife revealing that her husband knew he was being hunted. All of these details form a puzzle that no one in power seems willing to complete, and that's the most haunting part. Weeks later, we have no suspect, no confirmed motive, no closure. Just vague promises and empty press conferences. Meanwhile, his wife's words ring louder than ever. If something happens to me, it was not random. If she is right, then what happened in Utah wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. So we are left with questions that demand answers. Who silenced Charlie Kirk? Why was he allowed to walk into danger unprotected? And who benefits from his absence? Until those questions are answered, the story of Utah will remain unfinished. A wound that refuses to close. Now it's your turn. Do you believe Charlie Kirk's assassination was a random act of violence or a deliberate political hit? Was it negligence, conspiracy, or something even darker? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear every theory, every perspective, and if you want me to keep investigating this case, breaking down the timeline, exposing the unanswered questions, and following the evidence wherever it leads, make sure you smash that like button. subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown, because this isn't the end of the story. The truth is still out there. And until it's revealed, we'll keep asking the question that America cannot ignore. What really happened in Utah?